Hey everybody, this is Derek, aka No One on YouTube. Thank you for clicking on my video. And we're going to do, since I started doing some true crime stories, and a couple of you mentioned that you're very well aware of Mr. Ballen's channel, and I'm subscribed to him, and I watch his stuff, and he's a fantastic storyteller. Sometimes it goes into true crime, sometimes it's just mystery, and he released one yesterday, and this one is They Tried to Jump, but They Melted. So that sounds intriguing. So let's see what and if you guys haven't been introduced to Mr. Ballen, he is really great at storytelling. I mean, he captivates you. He leads you. He leads you to like the end where things get revealed. So he's very animated. He's very I love his voice too, just the way he talks, his mannerisms, everything about him is just really fantastic. So let's see what this story has to say. And as you guys know, I'm not one to like just react to somebody else's material on YouTube. Fair Use Act is when you can take somebody's video and transform it into something else, commentary, parody, things of that nature. So an analysis or something of that nature. So I'm going to be pausing here and there to talk about what I'm observing or whatever the situation is. So let's just get right into it. Just wanted to kind of like just preface my reaction to this with that. All right. And shout out to Mr. Ballen, and his channel link is going to be in my description so that you guys can go follow him. All right, let's go.
But once people have convinced themselves of something,
Wait a minute. Let's go. I don't know why it was like there, but Mr. Ballen. Okay, let's go.
Today, I'm going to tell you two stories that highlight how the world around us, and even our own eyes, can play tricks on us. Sometimes what people see is not what's really going on at all. But once people have convinced themselves of something, it can be very hard for them to change their minds. And as you'll see today, sometimes that can lead people into deadly situations.
Oh, this sounds interesting already. So we already know about perception, right? Sometimes you can perceive something, but it may not be what you perceive. And if that's the case, sometimes it could be a good thing. And other cases, like I guess what we're about to delve into, it could lead to, I suppose, some kind of tragedy. But
and as you'll see today, sometimes that can lead people into deadly situations. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload 2, 3, even 4 times a week. So if that's of interest to you, please offer to, for free, beautifully detail the like button's car. But instead of doing that, once you have their car, just bring it to a huge cliff, put the car in neutral, and push it off. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. Around 1:30 p.m. on the afternoon of May 18, 2007, a 57-year-old woman named Yvonne de Hoorde arrived at a park in Rotterdam, which is a city in the Netherlands. She was there.
okay, so her name is Yvonne. This is in the Netherlands. I have to do this because I get lost with my ADD. So her name is Yvonne. This is in the Netherlands.
On the afternoon of May 18, 2007,
2007.
a 57-year-old woman named Yvonne de Hoorde arrived at a park in Rotterdam, which is a city in the Netherlands. She was there to meet up with her friend, and she had to cut through the park to get to his house. Yvonne went to her friend's house almost every day. And usually when she walked through the park during the week, there weren't that many people around. But on this day, it was really crowded because it was the Friday of a long weekend, and there was just a lot of families and visitors that were enjoying the spring weather, which meant the playground, the pathways, and the park's little cafe were all packed. But Yvonne didn't pay that much attention to the crowds. because she was busy thinking about her friend. They'd known each other for years, and they had what she considered to be a very special connection that Yvonne didn't think she had with anybody else. Now, Yvonne knew that a lot of people might say her and her friend's relationship was sort of more strange than special. In fact, some people in her life actually openly disapproved of it. But for Yvonne, it seemed like
Did I miss something? Why would they disapprove of their relationship? Did my ADD just kind of like take over? Because, like I was talking about, hold on a second. Let me just back up a little bit. You guys are probably thinking, oh my God, Derek.
park to get to his house. Yvonne went to her friend's house almost 1:30 p.m. on the afternoon of May 18th, 2007. A 57-year-old woman named Yvonne de Hoorde arrived at a
Okay.
park in Rotterdam, which is a city in the Netherlands. She
Okay.
was there to meet up with her friend, and she had to cut through the park to get to his house. Yvonne went to her friend's
Oh, his house. I didn't catch that the first time. To go to his house. So this is a man. Well, obviously, duh.
there to meet up with her friend, and she had to cut through the park to get to his house. Yvonne went to her friend's house almost every day. And usually, when she walked through the park during the week, there weren't that many people around. But on this day, it was really crowded because it was the Friday of a long weekend, and there was just a lot of families and visitors that were enjoying the spring weather, which
Okay.
meant the playground, the pathways, and the park's little cafe were all packed.
Wow.
But
Okay.
Yvonne didn't pay that much attention to the crowds because she was busy thinking about her friend. They'd known each other for years, and they had what she considered to be a very special connection that Yvonne didn't think she had with anybody else. Now, Yvonne knew that a lot of people might say her and her friend's relationship was sort of more strange than special. In fact, some people in her life actually openly disapproved of it. But for Yvonne,
Okay, so I guess I didn't zone out because he didn't really touch on like what the relationship was like, other than the fact that she would visit him every single day. Now, remember, she's 57 years old. She okay, so let's just keep going.
it seemed like the main reason for that was, Yvonne was generally pretty friendly and social and sort of an outgoing, normal person, but her friend was extremely reclusive and never left his house. And so it just seemed like an odd pairing. Her friend was originally from Germany, but even though he'd lived in the Netherlands now for years, he'd never learned the language. So he really couldn't communicate with anybody, including Yvonne, at least not in her native tongue. But for Yvonne, if anything, the fact that people didn't necessarily think this was a good idea for them to be friends just made her feel more protective of her friend. And also, she was especially sympathetic to the fact that her friend had actually been abandoned by his mother as a child. And so in a way, she sort of felt like she was stepping in as sort of a maternal figure in her friend's life.
So I don't think he mentioned how old is her friend, because I was just sitting here thinking, okay, so did she kind of like try to and not assume, but you know what I mean, like maybe take like a mother figure role, or if not, anyways. But just wondering. But that is interesting. So he moved to the Netherlands, but he never learned Dutch. Um, so they can't communicate because she speaks Dutch and he speaks German.
And so Yvonne, she rounded a corner on the park's path, and up ahead, there was her friend's house. And she could actually see her friend through one of the windows. And he did not look particularly happy. He looked sort of dejected. And so as she approached, she made a big scene to be very smiley and happy, and she's waving to her friend. And sure enough, her friend at some point turned and looked out the window and saw Yvonne approaching, and he broke into a big smile and he waved back. It's like even though they didn't speak the same language, there clearly was a connection there. And Yvonne was just filled with happiness, so glad that she was here to see him. And so Yvonne, she made her way over to her friend, and that day really was spent the same way they spent all their other days together, which again, they don't speak the same language. So it was just sort of a lot of, body language and gestures and sort of just sitting together and just sort of enjoying each other's company.
That is so odd that if they've known each other for that long, that they wouldn't have learned some expressions or something in the other language. I mean, hello, how are you? I mean, anything? I find that odd.
Wasn't really any direct communication happening, but this was a unique relationship. And for Yvonne, whatever it was enough for her. And she felt like for her friend, it was reciprocated. He appreciated their time together, and that was enough. But even though Yvonne in particular really looked forward to these visits and was having a really nice time on this particular day, she couldn't stay forever. She had a family and other things she needed to get done. So at around 2:30 p.m., after having spent about an hour with her friend, she said goodbye to him, and then she turned and left, knowing that the two of them would see each other again soon. And so Yvonne, after turning and leaving her friend's house, she only got a few steps down the path she came in on when two things happened at once. The first thing was she noticed there was a group of kids in the park who were throwing rocks, and she knew instinctively, like, the kids should not be throwing rocks. So that sort of registered. She wasn't doing anything about it, but she was just aware that there are children throwing rocks nearby. And then the second thing she noticed is she heard splashing coming from behind her. She didn't think it was coming from the kids throwing rocks. She's thinking it didn't rain anytime recently, so there's no reason that there'd be splashing sounds around her. There's no puddles or anything. The only splashing that made sense was it was coming from this stream that was sort of off limits in the park. Nobody had access to it. There was no reason to get down there to that stream, but it sounded very much like that was the splashing that she was hearing. And so Yvonne, she's just consciously aware of these things happening. This was not something that was alarming. She's just aware. And so she found herself turning around to see in particular what that splashing sound was. And as she turned around, something huge smashed into her, pinned her to the ground. All she could hear was screaming throughout the park. And the last thought she had before she blacked out was, "Oh my God, I'm about to die."
Okay, so I'm sure he's about to give us the twist here. So she leaves her friend's house, and as she's walking through the park, she sees the kids throwing rocks, and she hears the splashing in that forbidden river. But then she blacks out. Thinking she's going to die. Well, let's see where this goes.
Not far away, a man named Arvid Hendricks, who had also come to this same park with his wife and his two kids, heard the screams echoing through the park. He was right outside the cafe that Yvonne had been walking towards, and he had just been about to go inside when all this commotion had started. So this particular cafe sat on a path that cut through the park itself. It was a small place, almost like a glorified snack bar, and it had a big pavilion right in front of it with outdoor seating that looked out over the park. And from Arvid's perspective, as he was standing on that pavilion near the cafe entrance, he could hear these people screaming and actually started to see them running in his direction. But Arvid had no idea what they were screaming about or what they were running from. It just seemed like all of a sudden everybody's panicking and coming this way. And so instinctively, Arvid's thinking, okay, there's something threatening going on, and he needs to make sure his family is safe before he even knows what the threat is. So he grabbed his kids and his wife, and he ran into the restaurant along with everybody else. And remember, this restaurant, this cafe, was not huge. Inside, it sort of felt like a dining hall with large communal tables. And so with all these people rushing inside, this place quickly became chaotic. And then after all these people came inside, a few of the people went forward and did their best to barricade the front doors. Even though they were glass and would be pretty easy to break through, they did what they could to sort of block them off.
Wow, that must have been some kind of screams and commotion for all those people to just run inside like a little cafe. Although the head of that family did the right thing, like first get your family to safety and then figure out like what the heck is going on. Don't go investigate and then put your family in danger. So that's a good thing.
Even though they were glass and would be pretty easy to break through, they did what they could to sort of block them off. After this, despite there still being this really intense energy sort of buzzing around the room, things actually kind of calmed down. Arvid and probably many other people in this cafe did not know what was going on. They had just sort of reacted instinctively and went in here, assuming there has to be some real threat out there. Let's take shelter. And so there's this weird lull period where everyone's kind of looking around, Arvid included, trying to figure out, is there really a big threat out there or are we overreacting here? And as they're all sitting there kind of wondering what's going on, the front doors, the glass doors, suddenly shatter. And once again, the whole group is thrust into absolute chaos once again, as all the parents are grabbing their kids and
that would be jarring.
Into absolute chaos once again, as all the parents are grabbing their kids, and even though they still don't really know what's going on, they're trying to rush towards those shattered doors to get out of this place, which now feels like it is dangerous, in some ways worse than outside. And so it's this huge bottleneck as the door, as everyone's screaming, there's just madness happening. And Arvid, he could tell there was no way he could get through this cluster of people desperately trying to get out. And so he just grabbed his wife and his kids, and they went under one of the tables and they hid. And for the next couple of minutes, everything all around Arvid and his family continued to be absolutely chaotic and madness. But then eventually, everything just went quiet as everybody else made their way out of the cafe. And it was just Arvid and his family sitting there wondering what the heck is going on. And for a moment, Arvid felt like, okay, I'm safe. I don't know what's going on, but me and my family, we are safe. However, before he instructed his kids and his wife to come out of their hiding spot, he heard the sound of more glass shattering, and then he heard these loud stomping sounds as something huge was making its way through those front doors into the cafe. And suddenly it hit Arvid when he looked out and saw what it was, why everybody was running. And he also realized that he and his family were now trapped. It would turn out all the people in Yvonne's life who frowned on her special friendship had been right to do so. Because although Yvonne loved her daily routine with her friend did not actually feel the same way. Every day when Yvonne...
Oh, okay. Well, here's a twist that I didn't see coming. Okay.
Had been right to do so. Because although Yvonne loved her daily routine with her friend did not actually feel the same way. Every day when Yvonne went to visit, she would sit with her friend and keep him company. And Yvonne's friend would smile back at her. This was sort of the rapport they had developed, at least in Yvonne's mind. The smiling back and forth suggested they were friends.
Here we go with the perception. Okay.
Mind, the smiling back and forth suggested they were friends. What Yvonne didn't realize is that them smiling back and forth was actually something her friend hated. Oh. And on that particular Friday afternoon, her friend was already in a very bad mood. The park that surrounded his house was so crowded and so loud, and those kids who Yvonne saw throwing rocks when she left had been doing it earlier. They were throwing rocks that whole time that she was visiting with her friend, and some of those rocks were hitting her friend's house, and it was making him so agitated and mad. And then the whole time through this interaction, Yvonne is smiling over and over at her friend, thinking this is so great, and it just totally sent her friend over the edge. And so when Yvonne finally left and walked away, the friend, should have felt relieved because now, one of the things that was really agitating him was gone. Yvonne, she was gone. But the friend knew she wasn't really leaving for good. She would just come back tomorrow, like she always did, with that same enraging smile on top of all the other things that were so annoying. And the friend just could not take it any longer. So he snapped. He stormed out of his house, splashing through that off-limits stream in the park to get to Yvonne as she walked away. And just before he reached her, she turned around and saw him. This time, he smiled at Yvonne before she could smile at him. And for once, she didn't smile back. Instead, she looked terrified. And this was because Yvonne's friend was a 400-pound silverback gorilla.
Oh, God, no. I did not expect this. Okay. Well, no wonder he didn't speak her language. All right, Mr. Ballen, you got me. Okay.
She didn't smile back. Instead, she looked terrified. And this was because Yvonne's friend was a 400-pound silverback gorilla named Boquito. And the park he lived in was a zoo. To silverback gorillas, smiling is not a sign of friendship. It's a sign of aggression and hostility. So it's very likely that from Boquito's point of view, almost every day for years, Yvonne had been coming to his enclosure, in essence, to threaten him. At least that's very likely how he interpreted it. And he had been basically threatening her back whenever he smiled by showing his teeth. And he thought maybe that would get her to go away.
Real footage of Boquito and Yvonne? Wow. I'm sorry, but I would... hello? Was she like... You don't go that close up to a silverback gorilla? What? That is crazy.
At least that's very likely how he interpreted it. And he had been basically threatening her back whenever he smiled by showing his teeth. And he thought maybe that would get her to go away, but it never worked. She always came back and just continued to threaten him. And so eventually, like the story goes, it became too much. Luckily though, Boquito didn't harm really anybody except for Yvonne. He bit her over 100 times and broke multiple bones, but Yvonne did survive. But no other guests were harmed, including Arvid and his family. You know, they were trapped in that cafe with Boquito, who after...
Oh, real footage of Boquito in the cafe. That's crazy.
Including Arvid and his family. You know, they were trapped in that cafe with Boquito, who after attacking Yvonne had charged in there and was walking around, but Boquito never attacked. And so at a certain point, Arvid and his family were able to run to safety. After she recovered, Yvonne would tell the media that Boquito was still her darling. That's what she called him.
Wow.
And in fact, she would go back to the zoo to see Boquito after that. But this time...
Whoa. Now, if this was in America, they would have like put Boquito down immediately for... How many times did it say that he bit her? 50 times? 100 times? I already forgot, but even if it was 50, that's a lot. I am shocked that they didn't put the gorilla down.
She called him. And in fact, she would go back to the zoo to see Boquito after that. But this time, she didn't smile.
Okay, so that was a cool, not a cool story. You know what I'm saying? You see what I mean about Mr. Ballen's storytelling? Like the way he was telling the story, I was thinking that she was going to visit like some, because he said, you know, him or his, you know, so I'm thinking like it's just some man. Well, he said like, you know, it just made it sound like it was a human that she was having a friendship with, you know. Let me know in the comment section if you were duped. Did the what's the word? The reveal. Did it get you too? Did you react like that too? Because I was like, what? But okay, so here's story number 2 or number 1. That was the second story. So here's off the bus. Okay.
At 3 a.m. on August 11th, 1965, a 19-year-old student named Ali Dogan sat in the front seat of a passenger bus as it headed down a dark, narrow road in northwest Turkey. Ali...
Okay, so this is in Turkey. Her name is Ali. Did they say her name? Again, I have ADD and I just gotta put this in my head as he continues the story.
1965, a 19-year-old student... At 3 a.m. on August 11th, 1965,
1965.
a 19-year-old student named Ali Dogan sat in the front seat of a passenger bus as it headed down a dark, narrow road in northwest Turkey. Ali and about 50 other passengers were on their way from the city of Ankara to Istanbul, which is the largest city in Turkey. Okay. And they were about 3 hours into a 5-hour trip. Ali had passed the time so far by speaking with the man who just happened to be sitting next to him. He was an Air Force lieutenant. The lieutenant told Ali that originally he had actually been booked to take a flight to Istanbul, but he had missed the flight, and so here he was on the bus. But he told Ali that actually he was really enjoying this bus ride. He had never been on a long bus ride before, and critically, he had scored the very front seat in the bus, so he could basically see out the front window of the bus. And so for him, that was kind of exhilarating. And for Ali, he had actually switched spots with a previous passenger who had been sitting next to the lieutenant when they first boarded. He had switched with that person because Ali, the reason he was switching, was he wanted that view too. And so he and this lieutenant were sort of bonding over their shared excitement over, watching the road as they drove for hours on end. Ali and the lieutenant spoke in very quiet voices since almost everybody else on the bus was fast asleep. But these two, they're pumped, they're watching the road, they're talking about it quietly. But at a certain point, Ali, despite his enthusiasm for this ride, he started to feel pretty drowsy too. Ali was on his way back to Istanbul where he went to college.
Oh. So Ali is a guy. I'm thinking it was a girl.
Almost everybody else on the bus was fast asleep. But these two, they're pumped, they're watching the road, they're talking about it quietly. But at a certain point, Ali, despite his enthusiasm for this ride, he started to feel pretty drowsy too. Ali was,
I guess, like here in America, if your name is Ali, I have a lot of girlfriends named Ali, so maybe it's just different in that part of the world, or maybe it's considered a unisex name. I'm not quite sure, but all this time I'm sitting here thinking this was a girl. Oh, but okay.
On his way back to Istanbul where he went to college.
Okay.
And later that day, because right now it's 3 a.m., later that day, he had a big exam. And he knew that as much as he wanted to stay up and sort of enjoy the ride, he really needed to get some sleep. So he took his sweatshirt and rolled it up like a pillow, put it behind his head, told the lieutenant he was going to sleep for a bit, and then he put his head back and closed his eyes. However, about 15 minutes later, when Ali was just really beginning to actually fall asleep, the bus was suddenly filled with screams, and Ali, he opened his eyes and he was looking out forward in the direction the bus was going, and he saw these bright headlights bearing down on the bus, and he knew they were about to collide with somebody on the road.
Uh-oh.
And then the bus hard swerved to the right, and Ali's trying to hold on to the partition to keep himself seated, and he's getting ready to smash into this other vehicle, but right at the last second, the bus turns and slams off the road and comes crashing down in this ditch right off the side of the road. And then the bus kind of lurched to a stop because the bus driver was able to stop the crash. And for a second, Ali's looking around. Everyone's so shaken up by this. And he's feeling, very relieved that they did not smash into an oncoming car.
Right.
But despite feeling that relief, Ali quickly realized they had another problem. The bus was starting to fill with smoke. And so Ali and the lieutenant, in virtue of sitting at the very front of the bus, were the closest to the door leading off the bus. And now clearly everybody needs to evacuate. There's some kind of fire that's happening because of the crash they've just been in. And so Ali and the lieutenant, they stand up, and the bus is kind of at a slant here because they're in this ditch, and they go up to the very front of the bus, and they actually look out the cracked front windshield, and they see there's this huge truck also in the ditch on the side of the road, and they're figuring that they must have collided in some way, like that was the truck that forced the bus off the road. And so it's like, okay, they've gotten into this accident. There's clearly a fire. We just got to get off this bus. And so Ali and the lieutenant, they get to the door and they try to open it. But the way the bus kind of crashed into this ditch, it sort of warped the frame of the bus.
Oh, no.
And so the lieutenant, he got down there and he began smashing on this door to try to open it up. And as this is happening, the smoke is getting much more intense inside of this bus, and all the people on the bus, the 50 some odd passengers behind them, they're starting to panic. Everyone's rushing forward, bumping into Ali and the lieutenant, trying to get off this bus. And then finally the lieutenant, he manages to force open the doors. And the second he does, this additional rush of black smoke comes pouring into the bus. It's like you can't even see anything. Everyone's choking and screaming. And the lieutenant, he just yells to Ali to go, get out, jump out. And so Ali, he's the first one off the bus. He climbs down the steps. All he sees is smoke everywhere. He really has no idea where the fire is actually coming from. And so instinctively, he just jumps out of the bus, just jumps as high and as far as he possibly can. and he actually hits the other side of the ditch, and he kind of stumbles and climbs up and gets away from the bus. And as soon as he did, he turned around and he's looking at the bus, and it's nighttime, but even still in the darkness, he just sees the bus is completely engulfed in all this smoke. He can't quite tell where the fire is. He's thinking, the engine must have caught fire and it's spreading across the undercarriage of the bus, but it's getting so bad. And he's hearing all the people on board desperately
Screaming.
trying to get off out that door the lieutenant had forced open. But there's some kind of bottleneck. They're not getting out. It's like they're stampeding towards the front of the bus. People are screaming. It's chaos. And then Allie hears some of the windows being pushed open. People start jumping out the windows. I mean, they are desperate to get off this bus. And at first, what Allie hears are screams of what sounds like desperate and scared people just trying to evacuate. But quickly, those screams, when the folks started coming out of the bus, turned to pure agony. But as Allie is listening to this and watching this disaster unfold, he's thinking, okay, well, the reason they're screaming is because it's possible they could be catching on fire here, or maybe, they're jumping off and breaking bones or getting hurt from leaping out the window, and that's all terrible. But people are getting out of this bus, and before long, they're gonna come up and over that side of the ditch, and they're gonna join me. Like, these people, they're coming out of the bus. I'm seeing it happen. But all that happened is the screams of agony got louder and louder, and nobody came over that ditch.
So he must have escaped something really horrible, because it said that he jumped as far and as high as he could and got to the other side. So there's something that was more dangerous outside of the bus than there was in the inside. All right, I don't know where this is going to lead us to.
It was Allie all alone, and he had no idea why. All he sees is smoke, and all he hears is screams. And then at some point, authorities show up, and they clearly are right into the fray, trying to extinguish whatever fire is going on and trying to get people out and away from the bus. But despite this huge effort that Allie's watching happen right in front of him, granted it's obscured by the smoke, still nobody, including the lieutenant, came over the ditch to come be with Allie. He was all alone. But eventually, Allie noticed a few of the authorities that had shown up to assist in this emergency were walking away from the smoke in the bus, carrying what appeared to be bodies. But as Allie stared at these people carrying these bodies, he realized they weren't whole bodies. They were body parts.
Oh my God.
It would turn out most of Allie's and the rest of the passengers' assumptions about exactly what happened in that crash were correct. The bus they were riding in did swerve after seeing the headlights of an oncoming vehicle, and it did hit that big truck they saw on the side of the road when Allie and the lieutenant first got to the front of the bus and looked out. That was the truck they hit. Now, it was not a head-on collision. It was sort of a glancing blow as the bus swerved to avoid a head-on collision, but that crash sent the bus off the road into the ditch, and it was that crash into the ditch that ultimately prompted all that smoke. But they were all wrong about what was causing that smoke. There was no fire. The truck that the bus narrowly avoided the head-on collision with, but did ultimately strike, causing both the bus to crash and the truck to crash, that truck was a shipping truck, and it was transporting a huge amount of freight to Istanbul. And the collision burst the truck's shipping containers, and so the contents of those containers, the freight itself, poured out into that ditch. And that ditch that basically the bus had landed inside of, that Allie had sort of jumped over on his way to get out of the bus, and that others were sort of falling into when they were coming out of the bus to avoid this, fire, or so they thought. It already had some water in it when that freight entered into the ditch. So the freight and the water combined. And that combination caused a chemical reaction, and that chemical reaction caused the smoke. Because that freight was nitric acid, a highly corrosive, highly toxic liquid chemical that now, despite being diluted by the water in the ditch, had basically filled the ditch. The ditch is now effectively an acid bath that's smoking, giving the impression the bus is on fire. And so all these folks are leaping out of the bus and landing in the ditch, which again is an acid bath, and they're being dissolved by the acid. Allie, when he left the bus first, he leapt out of the bus. He thought there was the fire right there, and he jumped up and out trying to clear the fire. And what he really did is he cleared the acid bath and landed on the other side, avoiding dissolving in the acid. But virtually everybody else in the bus was going right into the acid. And so in the end, of the nearly 50 people on board that bus, 26 literally dissolved to death.
Wow. Wow.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. And remember, we have a whole playlist of Places You Can't Go episodes ready for you to binge right now. So go ahead and click here and give them a watch. All right, until next time, see ya.
Wow. I knew there was something. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I knew that there had to have been something that Arvid obviously escaped from jumping into because of the fact of the way he leapt out. So he escaped some kind of danger that unfortunately the rest of the bus passengers did not. But 26 out of 50, that's over 50% of the passengers that literally melted to death in an acid bath. Can you imagine how horrifying that would be? Oh, wow. Do you see what I mean about Mr. Ballen's storytelling? In the first story, I would have never guessed a silverback gorilla. What? I literally was picturing some old German man in his kitchen or something, reading the newspaper when she would come by. What were you guys picturing? What were you thinking it was? Let me know in the comment section. Did he fool you? Did he dupe you? By the way of his clever and brilliant storytelling? And then as far as the bus in Istanbul, what did you suspect the smoke was from? I don't know if I said it or just thought it, but I knew that it wasn't a fire. I could tell that it wasn't a fire, but I don't know, I guess because I don't think he said anything earlier about the truck that they ran into, what it was holding, the containers, and that the containers wasn't until the end that he mentioned that the containers spilled out and mixed with the water. And then what was it again? Hold on a second. Nitric acid. Okay. So it was nitric acid. Wow. Those are crazy. And Mr. Ballen is just genius at telling these stories. So I'm going to have the link to the original video in the description. It's going to have Mr. Ballen's link. Please go to his channel, subscribe, and press like. Watch his video uninterrupted. This is just a reaction to his storytelling. I hope that you enjoyed this reaction with me. Whether you've seen Mr. Ballen's video first, or if you're going to go back and watch it on your own, please make sure that you support Mr. Ballen, because that's very, very important. And then if you liked this reaction, then I hope that you will press subscribe, press like, the notification bell, so that you'll be notified whenever I put up an upload. Hope you share the video and the reaction, and that in the description is also going to be all of my socials, especially, more importantly, my Patreon. I hope that you will join me up on Patreon. You'll have early access to all the videos, videos that are blocked, go there, and then Patreon exclusive videos, such as documentaries, full watch concerts, full listen albums. So a whole bunch of stuff is over there. The content is growing. I mean, there's like almost 100 Patreon exclusive videos there. So come on over to Patreon, check it out. And remember, you have a voice on Patreon, and you have a say on what I react to next. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and end this reaction, And I hope everybody's having a great day. Enjoy the rest of the week and have a great weekend.